much of what I heard in your description too is where I see this intersection between equity and belonging. And so I find it really interesting. There are, depending on which practitioners you're talking to, we all sort of use different acronyms, but at the end of the day, we're largely generally driving toward these same expected results. I find it really, I love how you center your book on building cultures of belonging, and how you weave in these elements of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging together. One of the things that stood out to me was, this quote that belonging is a core human need, one so many of us expect to find at work, where the formation of community is a given, but a sense of healthy community is not. And our organizations can see and should see us, welcome us, and value us for all we are. And as you were sharing some of these examples, I think about how when we feel a sense of belonging, especially when we belonged in most of the spaces in which we live, in which we work, in which we are educated, it does create blind spots, right? That's that element of privilege that I think sometimes it's hard for folks who have just lived, for the most part, lived their lives belonging someplace. And it can sometimes be really challenging, I think, sometimes for folks, especially people in leadership or power positions, to understand what it's like to not belong in most spaces, right? And then to be able to address, how do we change that? So I love what you were sharing about the data, and just like the practical requests versus the how do I create a culture of belonging for others? Because it's like, well, I have it, and I'm sort of shocked that other people don't have it. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the book and this notion of what it means to build a true culture of belonging.
And I think that this is where we have to get really specific on what we mean when we say belonging, because there are forms of belonging that are negative. And I will just emphasize, because we feel that we belong to a particular group or to a particular place or affiliation, it may lead to us making decisions that go against our own values and ethics. And when we think about belonging as association, that's where we have the biggest risk in terms of really amplifying those gaps in our understanding and reinforcing biases and prejudices. When I talk about belonging, I always go back to the work of Roy Baumeister, who greatly influenced the book Cultures of Belonging. And he's really the researcher who coined the term belongingness and made it a part of psychological thought and theory. And basically, very simply put, he said, to belong is to matter. You matter to others. And that's different than an association. You can belong to a group and not feel that you matter within that group. And in fact, that's the experience of a lot of employees within organizations, which is driving our great resignation. And so I've thought for 10 years now, what does it mean to matter in an organization? And that's what a culture of belonging is. And when I've done that work and that research, what I found is that belonging is about feeling part of something greater than yourself that values and respects you, and that you value and respect back. And in order for that to be achieved is actually pretty hard, because you have to be able to have real relationships with the people around you to feel part of something greater than yourself, and to feel that mutuality in terms of respect and value. You have to have the resources to do it. You could have every intention and have no time, have competing priorities, not have enough money to pay people what they're worth. There are a lot of things that get in the way of having these meaningful relationships. And then the last piece is reciprocity. Reciprocity is all about this idea that you have to essentially give what you get. And that's very difficult in an organizational structure, especially today. You have employees who feel really guilty when they quit, and LinkedIn posts about people being fickle, when you know from an organizational standpoint, especially if you have shareholders, at some point it'll be your fiduciary responsibility to lay people off. So the expectations are not the same, behaviors are not the same, creates an imbalance. The other piece of it, though, is I am seeing this a lot right now. We have organizations who are ranked best places to work every year and have phenomenal cultures internally. And what they sell or what they do is ethically ambiguous or negative. And what you have in terms of a lack of reciprocity there is you have employees who feel a strong sense that they are valued and respected by their organizations, but they don't value and respect their organizations in turn. And that makes them feel like outsiders. And we have people questioning very much the nature of the work they do and whether it creates harm or does anything to create good. So in thinking about why that's important, the reason that I want to emphasize it is, in some ways, both of those respondents in that survey are talking about the same thing. It's just that what they have to contend with is different. So the folks asking those really practical questions about pay and promotion are really asking, how do I know that you value me truly? And those folks who are saying, well, how do I make sure not to commit microaggressions, are asking themselves, wait, do I not value and respect you? Am I not showing up in the right ways to do this? But it's a very big difference. One of those issues impacts your entire life, your generational wealth, your sense of security and stability, your self-esteem. And the other is much more intangible and you could avoid or deny. And so being able to also be very clear on what needs to be prioritized is super important. And that's why at Ethos, one of the things that we always tell our clients is get your house in order. Before you write a statement, before you make a big donation to a charitable organization, ask your employees how they're doing and determine what it is that you need to structurally change. And that's what the book is about. It's built around my model, recruiting, retention, promotion, and protection, R2P2, of how you assess where you are and how you build strategies to dramatically improve conditions for underrepresented and underserved employees. And then you can go out to the community. We do a ton of community work with our clients at Ethos, but there's a threshold. For some of them, we don't even start that work until 3 years in, as much as they want to be doing it, because we'll say, as long as we're seeing these problems within your organization, we have a high risk of perpetuating harm in the community because we're taking this mode of thinking, these lenses, these practices, and we're imposing them on groups who generally need something from us, which creates a whole other power dynamic. So we need to get into a place where we believe and our employees believe that we are at that place of belonging to go out and expand our communities.
The Culture Stew podcast is a product of MSM Global Consulting and produced by Shelby Rowe Productions. Please give us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform so other people can find us. There are many ways to connect and keep the conversation going with us. Check out our website at www.msmglobalconsulting.com. You can also share your thoughts with us directly by emailing info@msmglobalconsulting.com and putting Culture Stew in the headline. Follow us on Instagram at MSM_global, Facebook at MSM Global Consulting, Twitter at Global MSM, and LinkedIn at MSM Global Consulting. Let's keep the conversation going.